So my name is Phil Wicklund. I'm super excited to be here today. First of all, I love this town. This is my first time in Europe, actually. So I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, United States. This city is amazing. I think 80% of the homes in Minneapolis were probably built in the past 50 years. So it really is spectacular coming to a place like this. So I thank you for the opportunity to come share with you. I'm excited to be here too because this community is amazing, the SUGCON community. It's a blessing for me to give back to you, and I hope this time is encouraging. I hope you guys get a lot of great ideas that you can go back to your companies and businesses to get more value out of the platform. So part of the reason why I'm excited as well is I love this topic. I think personalization is probably the most important feature of SUGCON. I may be biased, of course. I'm more on the marketing side, and at a dev conference, that's probably a little risky. You know, they say SUGCON was built by developers for developers, which I'm a believer of. But the reality is, SUGCON's customers purchase SUGCON because they value their customers. They're sold on the vision of what the platform can do for their business and for their customers' businesses. And I think personalization is one of the most significant opportunities to really drive transformation in a business, as well as one of the most significant opportunities to get value out of the platform. There are a lot of CMSs out there. There are a few, though, that can really deliver on a vision transformation. And personalization, in my mind, is one of the most significant capabilities of SUGCON to drive that transformation. So that's why I'm excited about this topic. So we all know, let's see if I can get my clicker working. I might have to do this hard way. So most people know what personalization is. If you're a marketer and you weighed in on the buying decision of SUGCON, chances are you know that personalization is there to help provide a timely, relevant experience for your customers. That's kind of the motto here. Personalization is the practice of dynamically tailoring your site to the wants and needs of each user. So that's the basic promise. The interesting thing, though, is personalization is a spectrum. So I got a picture of a motorcycle here. I have another picture of a motorcycle here. The spectrum of what you can do with personalization in SUGCON is no less small than this spectrum here that you see on the screen. I was working with a large bank in the United States, and we were brainstorming opportunities to personalize their experience. Some of their best ideas were, I think, more on the tactical side of the spectrum. So, for example, they wanted to swap out all the imagery on the site to make the imagery more relevant to the user. So, for example, if you are in San Francisco, showing a picture of the San Francisco skyline versus if you're from New York, you might see something else. And in some sense, that is important, right? If you're a national company, creating that local feel is an important objective that you can use personalization for. However, I think it's not quite transformational. It's not changing how they do business. It's not changing how their customers interact with their brand. On the flip side, we're brainstorming other opportunities, such as how can you understand where a customer is at in their home buying journey? Can you somehow gather intelligence about that customer? Are they looking for homes? Are they looking for agents? Are they trying to find a bank? Are they trying to get qualified? Are they trying to improve their credit score? So how can the brand become an asset to the customer throughout the entire journey versus just what I kind of call poor man's personalization, which is staying on the tactical side. You might do some with geo IP. Maybe you personalize based off of a goal or an outcome. And again, those things are good. That's probably where you start, but it's not where you end. If you really want to achieve transformation for your customers, you have to think bigger. You have to go beyond the tactical. And that's really my goal today, is to help you think beyond the tactical when you think about personalization for your customers. How do you think strategically about personalization to move you beyond the basics and achieve transformation? So that's kind of my intro. So hopefully you guys will judge that I met that objective at the end of this. We'll see. I'm going to start with some basics. I'm not assuming that anybody here is already an expert on personalization. Maybe raise your hand if you've configured a personalization rule in SUGCON. Everybody. All right. I might have to go really fast through that portion, which is great. That's not why we're here anyhow, right? After that, I'm going to start talking about behavioral personalization, taking personas, mapping them into the experience, content strategy, and so forth that goes along with that. Moving beyond that, I'm going to talk about automating your journeys. That's really where you're starting to get into a more transformational experience. I'm going to talk a little bit about testing. How do you understand the impact that personalization is having on your experiences? After all, this is personalized for impact. We want to measure that. And then I want to talk very pragmatically about how do you get started. So I have a personalization roadmap that you can take to your company or your customers. And hopefully it'll help shape, if your customer hires you to create a personalization strategy, what goes into that strategy? What are the deliverables? Where do you start? How do you articulate a personalization strategy? So hopefully at the end, things get really pragmatic for you. So at the end, you can go home, you can go to your customers, you can start working with them and actually create a real compelling personalization strategy that can transform their business or your company. Just a little bit about me. So I already said my name is Phil Wicklund. My Twitter handle is there. I own a small business in the United States called Brilliant Solutions. Do a lot of freelancing. So that's kind of me. I've written a couple books. I wrote a book on SUGCON strategy. Most of what I'm talking about today is in this book. So if you need a takeaway, here's my shameless plug. Pick that up. I also wrote a dev book with my good friend Jason Wilkerson. So if you're new to SUGCON development, you need a place to get started. That's a great resource as well. I'm a SUGCON strategy MVP. So again, I tend to fall more on the marketing side, but I know enough about dev to be able to write a book. However, I'll give Jason the credit. He wrote all the code. I was just describing this code, which is a lot easier. So that's a little bit about me. Let's talk about what I think are the 3 different types of personalization. This is definitely not from the standard SUGCON documentation, so this is just Phil's perspective on the world, so take it with a grain of salt. The first type, though, is the most basic type, what I call rules-based personalization. Basically, this is the if this, then that personalization. So that example that I gave around swapping out imagery to create a more local brand feel, it's very easy to use this kind of personalization to accomplish that. The next kind is what I call behavioral personalization. So SUGCON can actually learn about your users. SUGCON can understand the patterns, the behaviors that your users are exhibiting. And over time, over multiple sessions, grow a familiarity of who that user is, what are their wants, what are their goals, what are they trying to accomplish. And it can match those behaviors into profiles. And you can personalize based off of those profiles. So I call this behavioral personalization. It's definitely one of the more powerful types of personalization, but it doesn't come even close, I think, to what I call automated personalization. So if you know a customer, you know their wants, their goals, what they're trying to accomplish, you take that home buyer who's on a journey to buy a home. That journey extends beyond the life cycle of a transaction. And it's also a complex purchase. It's not B2C in the sense where you search for product, you find a product, you buy a product. This journey is hard. It takes a lot of information to make a good decision. So how can you facilitate that journey? We're going to talk a little later about engagement plans, how you can use them to automate, facilitate a journey, and then personalize based off stage, right? So it's moving beyond just behaviors. It's also now understanding where that customer is at in the buying journey. And that truly is transformational. We now know where they're at, where they want to get to, and what it takes to get there. So showing personalized content, white papers, downloads, whatever it might be, to help facilitate that journey forward so that they progress in that journey and they progress with your brand. That's really the power of automated personalization, as I coined the phrase. So let's just talk a little bit about rules-based personalization, since 75% of you already know what that is. I'm going to go a little quicker than I might have otherwise. But could be some newbies on the phone or and join me, so I'll take a little bit of time. So rules-based personalization is quite easy. Basically what you do is you open up Experience Editor, you select a component, and as you can see here, with that component selected, you get a ribbon bar to select text messages while I'm presenting, which is great. You get a little ribbon bar here and you can select to configure personalization on that component. The little people icon there is the selector you can use. Once you click on that selector, you get a pop-up. This is where you select the rules. So for example, you can have one or more conditions. So in this example here, we're doing some GeoIP personalization. So if the user is coming from Georgia, show this content. If they're coming from California, show this other content. Otherwise, Ohio, we have Ohio content. Otherwise, at the bottom, we have our default content. So that's just a basic rule configuration. There are many, many out-of-the-box rules, over 50. And it seems like they're adding more every release. They add a few extra in there. So it's been fun to see from 8.0 RTM to what it is now. They've added quite a few. It's also very easy to build your own. Now, this is my only code in the whole presentation. So if you're coming here to get gushed on with code, soak it up, because this is it. But this is how easy it is to build custom rules. You really just need one line. Well, you probably don't have one line of code, because this would be pretty crappy personalization rule. But you just have a method that returns true. You register that rule within Sitecore, so that Sitecore is aware of it. And then your method does whatever it needs to do. Maybe it goes after the user profile for some custom data. Maybe we go hit a CRM to understand more about the user. Whatever that code needs to do, you put there and you return true or false, and that's how that rule is resolved. So quite easy and compelling when you think about the possibilities. So let me just do a really quick demo for those who haven't seen this before. Let's get away from that.
Whoa.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. In a mirror so I don't have to look over my shoulder. Maybe I'll just minimize that so we don't have to look at that again. All right, so I have my Launchpad open. Now, since I'm a marketer, I'm going to pretend I'm a marketer, or I'm going to go into the Experience Editor. I try to do everything in the Experience Editor. As a consultant, I try to make it so that my marketer never has to go to the content editor, ideally. So I'm going to try to do this entire thing here, which you would expect anyhow. So let's just look at some basic configuration. I'm going to go on this component here. You see I have selected this. Basically, I'm just going to do a quick demo on personalizing based off of a goal. So if I click on the people icon, up here I can toggle this to allow personalization for this component. And I'm just going to click plus here to add a new rule. And I'm going to say if they've downloaded a brochure. If they downloaded a brochure, I'm assuming that they're going to be more qualified than they might otherwise be. I'm going to edit this rule, and I'm going to do a search on goal. So here's a rule that says when the specific goal is triggered during the current visit. Oh, yeah, sure. Let's see, how do I zoom in? Control plus, Command plus. How's that? A little bit more. All right, we're gonna stretch Sitecore's imagination here. Oops. Oh, now I lost my duplicate display here. So you PC users have it so much easier sometimes. Okay, so here's my goal. Oh, I got two of them. I didn't want that. All I have to do is select which goal I want to personalize based off of. I have a goal here called brochure request. This is not exactly the most thrilling demo, but it demonstrates the concept. What do I want to do when that request loads? Basically, I can personalize the component. So I could show two different components based off of, if I want to totally change the rendering. So I can select a component here. Or I can just change the content. In this particular case, I'm just going to swap components, and I want to show a call to action. Since they downloaded a brochure, let's show a call to action because we think this person is more qualified than they might otherwise be. I'm going to create a new content item for this call to action. Buy now. Okay on that. Click OK on that. So now this component has two different pieces of content, and I can see that here with this 2/2. And I'm just going to toggle to the brochure downloaded piece. And there's my component. I'm just going to add some text. Yes, buy now. You sure should. Right, that's pretty compelling. You'd respond to that call to action, right? That's great. All right, so I'm just going to save this page. Now I need to go somewhere to register this goal. A lot of times goals are registered with code. However, I'm a marketer and I don't know how to do that. So I'm going to go to another page and just pretend for a moment that if you go to the introduction page, let's pretend that that means you downloaded a brochure. It's kind of weak sauce, but you know, we're demonstrating the concept here. So let's go to optimization. Here's how you can register a goal on a page. Every time somebody hits this page, they downloaded a brochure. So nothing too crazy. All right, I'm gonna go back home so I can publish these changes. Let's go home, publish, publish, yes. All right, now let's do a test. Here's my site. Everything looking good. Let's go here, introduction. It's an amazing page. Let's go back home. And now we have our call to action. So pretty basic, but it's also super easy. So in the one sense, as a marketer, I try to encourage my marketers to get their hands dirty and play with the tool, because in minutes, you can have a pretty big impact on your experience. That's as easy as it can be. Now, the hard thing is knowing what to personalize. So configuring the personalization is easy. You know, 80% of you raise your hand. That must mean it's pretty easy to do. The hard thing is, what do you personalize? And that's what we're going to get into here in a little bit more detail. So I get back to my deck. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about behavioral personalization. So how do you segment your customers? As marketers, we segment all the time. Maybe you create a list of a campaign or a social interaction. We're always thinking about who are our customers, how do we categorize them, how do we target them. Typically in the context of an email campaign, perhaps, or a direct mail campaign. But I'd like to encourage you to think about segmentation also in the context of personalization. We go pretty granular in our segmentation strategies as marketers. But oftentimes when we think about web personalization, it tends to be harder to achieve such granularity. And so we already talked a little bit about, you know, segmenting based off of events, stuff that happens. A user came in from a campaign. We want to relaunch that campaign for those people who have interacted. We want to target everybody who's downloaded a white paper or requested a demo, right? That's kind of that rules-based personalization we've already talked about. You can also, though, when you think about behavioral personalization, get more complex. So instead of just responding to events, how can we learn preferences? And so perhaps we could segment on brand preference. Maybe as the customer is browsing the experience, we've configured the content as such as it is tagged with different brands. And we can learn over time what brand that customer tends to interact with more. And that intelligence can be a segmentation opportunity, both in email or direct mail, but also in personalization. Another opportunity could be industry. So if you're a B2B company and you sell and market to many industries, you might want to tailor your message based on the industry that that customer is in. And so it's really important if you have anonymous or known users interacting with your experience, to understand perhaps what industry they're in so that your message can be tailored accordingly. There's an opportunity too around content preferences. So as the customer is interacting with your content, you might want multiple different kinds of content in your experiences so that you can best meet the needs of unique users. So this could be high-level content, detailed content. Maybe you have a user that prefers comparing products. Maybe you have a user who wants detailed specifications, right? All that intelligence is important in your segmentation strategies as well as your personalization strategy. One of my favorite is persona. So most people know what personas are. Personas are clusters of behaviors. So behaviors are somewhat abstract and agnostic, right? Things people do on your site. A persona takes those behaviors and tries to categorize them. Because you might have a, let's just say, Sergio here likes high-level content, GMC, is in the healthcare industry and has downloaded some white papers. You could perhaps conceptualize all of that into a persona called Sergio and now target and segment based on persona. And that's really powerful because you can understand multiple dimensions of who that customer is. Again, their goals, their wants, their desires, their needs, things they like, things they don't like. And your content then can and should reflect those wants and needs. And now when you start to personalize on persona, you have so many more possibilities for what that personalization strategy can drive into because of all of these dimensions that persona represents. So to take this a little deeper and apply SUGCON to it, a SUGCON has some items in the content tree, profiles, profile keys, profile cards, pattern cards. So that's basically how you configure all of these behaviors within SUGCON. A profile has a set of behaviors, which are called profile keys. I apologize for the nomenclature here. It's a little hard to get used to at first. Behaviors are mapped to profile cards. So I like to think of it in terms of a persona. A persona exhibits behaviors in your digital experience. Those behaviors are called profile keys. The persona itself is represented as a profile card. Now, how does SUGCON learn which persona a user is? SUGCON uses another item called a pattern card. A pattern card represents the behaviors and the weighting of those behaviors. So that over time, basically, you accrue points. So let's just say you had 8 behaviors, and as you interact in your site, you're interacting with tagged content, and you accrue points along the lines of those behaviors, such that over time, you start to exhibit a pattern. This pattern card is what maps those behaviors to the points you've accrued. And that's how SUGCON learns what persona you are or what behaviors you're exhibiting. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So here we have, if you go into the marketing control panel, underneath profiles, this is where you can configure all of this. So we have a profile called persona. A persona has behaviors called profile keys. Those profile keys are configured on a profile card. And this card, Lenny, in this case, has this weighting of behaviors. So 2 points for app seeker. Contributor, 4 points. And so again, as you navigate the experience, you accrue points. The pattern card is what matches the accrued points to Lenny. So in this case, the Lenny pattern card is configured identically to the Lenny profile card because Lenny is Lenny is Lenny. Now you could do it differently between the two, but in the example of a persona, the profile card and the pattern card would be configured identically because you want to match Lenny to Lenny. Does that make sense? A little bit? However, like I said earlier, it doesn't have to be a persona. So in this case, we have a profile called vacation types. And all I want to do, I don't care about all that other stuff. I just want to understand, does this customer tend to favor one type of vacation or another? So are they looking for a golf vacation? Are they going on a honeymoon? Are they looking for a weekend getaway? So you can get very tactical with these behaviors too. Sometimes this is the easiest place to start. You know, if you already have an existing experience, maybe you don't have personas. You know, in your marketing department, maybe you have invested in the development of personas. And so, but you still have things, still have behaviors that people go to your site to do. So maybe more tactically, you go in and you start to look for what are these behaviors and just start to configure them like this so that you can personalize a little bit more tactically than a persona would otherwise be. This is just an example of a persona. Again, a persona represents goals, wants, needs, behaviors, things that the customer likes, things a customer doesn't like. And in that case, Lenny here, we mapped Lenny, like I said, to these behaviors. We have a little diagram here that shows the weighting, because not every persona is 100% any direction. Typically, a persona exhibits multiple behaviors. And so we have that representation here. The nice thing too is when you go to tag content, you can tag a piece of content with multiple personas, because not every piece of content is only applicable to one persona. So you can get pretty robust with your tagging strategy as well. So here's an example of that. So we have a page called Our Strategy. This page has been tagged with 3 different personas, because we've identified that this piece of content tends to map best to these personas. They tend to be more interested in this piece of content than other personas might otherwise be. Next here we have a showing of how you can tag that. Again, you can tag multiple personas to it and give it a weighting. So this particular piece of content is more about Lenny than it is about Paula in this particular case. So you can start to see here the opportunity to develop a rather rich content strategy that aligns to personas that is mapped directly into the platform. You know, personas used to be pretty abstract, right? Let me go back here. Your marketing department would invest tens of thousands of dollars with an agency in these personas, and they help create some kind of neat conversations. Maybe they helped influence a feature list, but then after that feature list is created, the personas are thrown away. Raise your hand if that's ever happened. Yeah, a few people. So oftentimes, agencies in the purest sense will create these personas, but the opportunity for a Sitecore partner is to create personas that really align to the platform. One of my favorite things to do is work with a UX team, user experience team, taking their personas and reflect back on the personas a pragmatic, measurable, objective, platform-aligned sensibility to those personas. So if I go back to Lenny in this case, you know, finding opportunities to make every single bullet measurable. Because you might find that your marketing department whips up all these personas, but maybe you actually don't know who your users are. You need some feedback into if your personas are accurate or not. So if you can measure these things, if you can take personas and actually create a measurement strategy around them by aligning goals, events, failure events, and outcomes directly into the persona itself. I wish I had an example, but a persona in my world would have two sides of the coin. This would be the marketing side, but the flip side would be the tech side, where we actually take goals, events, failure events, and outcomes and align each bullet so that we can measure every interaction that this persona exhibits. And then over time, you can start to gain a familiarity if you actually understand your users or not. You may actually do some analytics. You may learn that you actually didn't know exactly who Lenny was. Maybe Lenny is exhibiting behaviors we didn't understand. And now you can change that persona. You can change your content. You can change your personalization now that you better understand your users. Slight sidebar there. This is kind of obvious, but you can see here pattern matches are mapped into the user profile. So an interesting opportunity that I found is to integrate Sitecore user profiles with CRM. If you have a sales team who's calling on customers, having this extra bit of intelligence can be truly powerful in how they shape their emails, and the phone conversations. If I know that I'm reaching out to Lenny and not Paula, I might change how I talk to that person. I might change the attachment that I give to that person. I might send them a different link because I know that they're more interested in this than that. And so I think an interesting opportunity is to take all these behaviors and set up bi-directional integration with your CRM to truly empower your sales team with that local intelligence. Now, you could just train your sales team to go to Sitecore. We all know it's impossible to train your sales team on just about anything. So let's just put it in the tool they're familiar with, Salesforce or Dynamics or whatever it is. It's a really cool opportunity. A couple other things. This is the out-of-the-box rule that you can use to personalize. So you see here the rule says where the current visit matches Paula in the persona profile. There are a couple rules. This rule is basically the rule I use all the time when I'm trying to personalize based off of behaviors. Okay. So with this configured, I can show her high content when it's Paula versus Lenny in this case. A couple things. Profile decay is a really cool capability. Sitecore can learn about the user over a long period of time. Maybe what I want to do is personalize just on the current visit. Or maybe I want to personalize just on the past 6 months of behaviors. And you might want to weight that differently. Profile decay allows you to weight more recent behaviors over older behaviors. So if I go back to the home buying example, maybe 6 months ago, I was looking for an agent. And I exhibited those behaviors of maybe researching content that shows how to pick an agent, the things to look for. But recently, I'm starting to exhibit behaviors on improving my credit score. So 6 months ago, I probably wanted to personalize more on helping that person pick an agent. But today, since the behaviors are changing, I want to help the person improve their credit score. And so profile decay allows you to specify with each session how much do we weight that session against historical sessions. So it's just a way you can configure how much to value recent experiences over historical experiences as those patterns that a customer is exhibiting might change over time. I think probably the elephant in the room at this point is this is all about content. The reality is, and actually the potential is, any piece of content now can be viewed with multiple perspectives. Any given piece of content might really need multiple copies of that content to speak in a different way based on who this persona is or what behaviors they're exhibiting. The reality is your personalization strategy is fundamentally integrated with your content strategy. You cannot talk personalization without also in the same sentence talking about content. Otherwise, without content, what are you actually personalizing? And so if you guys are in services, you can't sell personalization strategy without selling content strategy. I think that's kind of a fundamental shift too. Oftentimes, content strategy is done totally in the abstract from technology implementation. You have these agency purists who whip up personas, they whip up content, but they don't have that platform perspective. Now, with personas directly mapped into a platform with tagging, with behavioral recognition, you have to have content that aligns to that. Otherwise, you're not going to have anything to personalize on. So that's an important tip. When you're working with your company or your customers, helping them understand that these two really go together. All right, let's do a quick demo here. Anybody have a time? I started my timer too late. 10 minutes left, holy cow. I'll come back to the demo if I have time. Sorry, I get a little long-winded. All right, so automated personalization. So again, we already talked a little bit about how behavioral personalization is cool, right? You're starting to move beyond the tactical and you're starting to achieve transformational. What's truly transformational, though, when you think about personalization, especially in B2B. You know, B2C, this is a lot easier. You just show related products, right? Unless, you know, maybe you're buying an expensive camera, it might be hard. That might be a harder decision, comparing products or what have you. But in B2B, they're very complex sales. And so you have to understand that buying journey. It's not a simple journey, it's a complex journey. A lot of inputs go into making that decision. And so you have a persona that exhibits certain behaviors, but that also needs to be reflected upon where are they in that journey. And when you do the two together, you really start to achieve transformational personalization. So this is what this diagram here shows. So when you think about your content strategy, it's really a 2D model. So for example, I have my personas on the left, and I have my journey stage on the bottom. I might need, now obviously you don't want to open up Pandora's box and spend $1 million on content strategy, but it's conceivable that I might have a unique piece of content for every one of these interactions. Paula, Lenny in stage D probably should see something different than Zach in stage A, right? I had a customer who we had personas, we had journeys, but they also had industries. And depending on which industry that user was in, that was another factor that had to be applied on content strategy and personalization strategy. And we ended up with a 3D model of these interactions to really inform what to show when. So if you go back to what is personalization, it's showing timely, relevant information. Okay, so you have relevancy here. You have timely here. And that's how you achieve timely and relevant, is you have a content strategy that understands relevancy and understands timing. You have a platform aligned to personas. You have a platform aligned to that journey stage with engagement plans. And that's how you can pinpoint where that customer is at any given time. This is an example of an engagement plan I created. Basically, just a quick one to help drive some intelligence into where they're at in the pipeline, whether it's passive interest, qualified interest, researching plans, or an application initiated. So as somebody interacts with your website, you can drop that user into an engagement plan. And as they continue to interact with your website, maybe they interact with your customer service department, maybe somebody calls them in your CRM and you got bi-directional synchronization going between your CRM and Salesforce. Maybe that interaction through a trigger moves them from one state to the next. This is really where you start to get truly transformational, as you have these engagement plans mapped to the journey. So every persona should have its own journey. If all your personas are on the same journey, you probably don't need personas, in my opinion. I mean, the persona represents attitudes, behaviors, wants, and needs. That means their buying journey is different than another persona. And so every persona should have a journey map associated with it. And that journey map should actually be implemented in SUGCON. And as they engage in content, now you're taking content strategy and you're trying to understand at which interaction are they moving from one stage to the next. When they see this content, they download this white paper. When they request a demo, those events, how does that translate into where they're at in the buying journey? So now your personalization strategy is even broader. You're not just thinking about show this, if that. You're not just thinking about this persona prefers that content. You're not even just thinking about where are they at in the journey. You're now applying a fourth dimension of what triggers what. What actually signifies that they're in one stage or another? What interactions with content demonstrate that? And where do we need to automate to facilitate progressing them down that content? The cool thing here is there's personalization rules where you can actually see, you can say, show this piece of content if they're researching plans. Show this other piece of content if they have passive interest. You know, so you can personalize based off which state in the journey they are in. Engagement plans are basically when you move from one state to the next, you can fire off actions such as send an email. You can throw in your own custom actions in here. You can also see, you know, where are your users in the journey? In some sense, this becomes your campaign strategy because you can look and you can see where's the bottleneck. All right, we've got a bottleneck in state 3. Well, let's create a tactical campaign to help people move from state 3 to state 4 because of this bottleneck. So in some sense, again, the tool itself becomes your campaign strategy. It informs what campaigns you need. So again, the interesting thing with Sitecore is your marketing strategy and your platform strategy and your technology are converging like they've never been before. 10 years ago, marketing and IT, they worked in total silos. Today, you can't. And I think actually, as far as Sitecore partners go, the best partners understand the convergence because you can't do these things in the abstract without knowing the platform and knowing the technology. All right, so imagine this possibility. Paula Visits from XYZ campaign has expressed interest in white papers and is showing an 80% probability to convert. That's achievable with everything I've talked about today. Truly compelling segmentation here. The granularity of our list is getting immense with something like this. All right, testing, holy cow, I'm way out of time. A/B testing, you know what that is. You can test a lot of things. You can test personalization, you can test components, you can test multiple pages. Out of the box, it's quite easy to begin a test. The default workflow has testing in it, just approved with test. It'll show you all the things it's going to test on the left there, on the right. After the test is complete, you can pick a winner. And you can see that the impact of that test is having. The trouble with personalization is there's no specific way to understand the impact of personalization on the test. If you think of your home page, it's a multivariate test. You might be testing multiple pieces of content, multiple different component renderings, multiple personalization rules. You might have 100 different variations of the page that needs to be tested. So how do you understand the impact of the test? Well, the simplest out-of-the-box way is just to look at the aggregate impact of the test. And I like to call it the Pac-Man approach. So make a change, test, measure the impact, make a change, test, measure the impact. And so as you change your personalization configurations, you can, if you do it locally, you can see the impact that personalization is having on the engagement value generated by that page. So just little bites. That's probably the easiest way. The next one is you could put a goal. So if you have personalization, you're showing 2 different things, a goal interaction, you can measure that goal. This gets a little out of control because you probably don't want to create a goal for every personalization instance. You'll have hundreds or thousands of goals, which is ridiculous. But it is out of the box and it's possible. Likewise, an event, this is a little more reasonable. Events are a little more ubiquitous. I could have an event every time a personalization instance is fired, and I can measure with analytics, Power BI, or PowerShell script. I could do a report and show that event occurring. And that could help me understand the impact of that personalization that it had on the page. If this event fired more than that event, that means this personalization had a bigger effect than that other kind. Yeah, that's what I just said there. Perhaps a custom script. I have a theory that all this data is in XDB somewhere. You could somehow relate that personalization instance to that visit and try to understand the impact that had. I haven't been able to dig into it. All right, Experience Explorer. Yeah, we're out of time. All right. Wow, that was fast. Okay. Well, thanks. Any questions? I was pretty much done anyhow. The next part is getting started. So if after this you want to talk to me, just very tactically, how do you get started? I can go into more detail. I can also get on a call with you next week. I'm a freelancer, so I can kind of do whatever I need to do. So if you want more tips, we can obviously get into that if you need extra help. I appreciate your time. And sorry for going over. You know, you do a dry run, but then you get up here and you just start rambling on. So before we break, any questions? Otherwise, come up here for questions later. Yeah, one in the back.
I was wondering if you did any personalization with search. It only lies from the search company, but still, have you done it? Because it's kind of part of the journey as well.
For sure. Yeah.
So have you ever tried to example, to offer different search results or something, rewriting results of personalization?
Yeah, I haven't personally, but I'm a big fan of Coveo for that reason. I don't know if you're from Coveo or not, but.
I am, but I was not a product plug.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there was.
No, it's a good plug.
We can do it.
I plugged my book, you can plug your tool.
But we can do it, but I was wondering if there was a more generic way to do it within the search provider.
Sure, no, I haven't personally done that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys, for your time. Look me up if you ever want to talk more about this. If you want some tips, example, deliverables, whatever, give me a shout. Love to help you out. Thank you.